everybody. Welcome to Offstage. Glad you joined us for this episode. My name is Greg.
I'm Brittany.
And we are here today to tell a story that is very unique and not something a lot of people have to go through. But we thought, you know what? Let's cover a topic that kind of shows how does a Christian deal with, a situation where they are unmoored and they have to enter into something totally new and find out new things, develop new skills, and then still have to walk through it with faith. And so we thought, how could we do that? And we thought, wait a minute, Brittany is on the podcast, which is a crazy deal. So here she is.
Can't believe it worked out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Little did we know when we met in 1998 and she was 12 and that we would be here.
I was making sure your math was right. Was I 12?
Yeah.
It was.
So, Britt.
Yep.
As we come into this, we've talked a little bit about your daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give a shout out to them all. We've got the lead dog, Lyndon.
Yep.
We've got the small, vicious one, Zini.
Yeah.
Laurel. Then we got Ans and we got Lou.
Yep.
Lou.
Louie.
And first two girls are born.
Mm-hmm.
There was a small complication with Lyndon firstborn.
Wouldn't call it small, but yeah.
Okay. Well, because that's because you're the mom, right? It was a medium-sized issue.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Would you say bigger than medium? We're not going into that right now.
Right. Okay.
Lyndon, we love you. We're not talking about that right now.
Sorry, girl.
So when Ans is born,
yep.
Right, something goes down, and it radically changes the course of your life.
Yes.
And your family.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people are going to know what this is who know you or listen, but we're keeping the suspense as long as possible.
Yep.
So, what are genetics?
Well, you have a mom and a dad. And
No, stop. This is a PG. This is a PG show.
Oh my God.
So, okay. So,
yeah.
Ansel.
Ansel.
Named after your granddad.
And dad.
Ans is mostly how we call her.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who aren't aware, you're just joining us. Brittany is my niece, so family ties
he knows.
here.
Yep.
Ansel's born, and a couple of days you find out something radically different. So let's talk about that journey a little bit.
Well, Ansel's my third, and like you said, there was a medium-sized issue with my less than stellar firstborn experience. Secondborn had premature labor and was kind of heading into that with Ansel, which is a big part of her story because at 34 weeks, she's born and in the NICU. So luckily, doctors were all over her at the time. And as she was born very strong for a 34-weeker and got very weak as the days went on without any kind of understanding of what's going on.
Right.
So we're in the NICU. We're watching our daughter die, essentially. And we can't figure out what's going on. And they're just, essentially saying prematurity just happens sometimes. Mm-hmm. They just are really not strong enough.
Right.
And day 7, I get a phone call from East Tennessee Children's Hospital that says your newborn screen came back that your daughter was flagged for a condition called Galactosemia. And if you don't know, most babies in the United States have the newborn screen to look for all kinds of genetic conditions that can be helped as soon as the baby's born. So Galactosemia is deadly in 10 to 14 days after birth, and we were on day 7.
Yeah.
So, we really...
What is galactosemia?
Oh, yes, I can tell you that. Galactosemia is a metabolic genetic condition. So my husband and I both carry a mutated recessive gene that does not affect us because if you remember from biology back in high school, the Punnett squares with dominant genes and recessive genes, your dominant gene masks the recessive gene. So we're fine, but she got 2 recessive genes that were mutated. And it caused a deletion of an enzyme in her body. So although we have like 1,500 enzymes, one deletion can cause
all
major
kinds of
problems. Yeah. So she does not have something called the GALT enzyme, which helps us break down lactose, which becomes galactose, which is the name, galactosemia. And when you can't break it down, it goes into your bloodstream and it poisons your body. So we were giving her a lot of lactose because breast milk and cow's milk formula
Right.
has a lot of lactose in it. It's the sugar that helps the baby grow.
Right.
So we were pumping her full of breast milk thinking this is the best thing for her, and we were poisoning her.
Right.
So day 7 comes, and we learn what this condition is, kind of. It's so rare that our neonatologists had not seen it. They knew about it from textbooks, but had not seen it. So at UT, it's a teaching hospital, so everybody's in. We're trying to figure it out. All these nurses are trying to learn from her. And yeah, our journey kind of starts there.
Yeah.
Like, what is this, and what do we do, and how do we take care of her, and what's her future going to be? So
Right. So, in the middle of that, tense days. Those were a
Yes,
lot of
very
extremely
tense.
tense days.
Yep.
For our family.
Mhm.
But I obviously was there and, trying to do what I could to pastor you guys and help.
Yeah.
But what's your faith journey like at that moment?
Well, it was really affected by the fact that we had already been through a traumatic
Right.
birth, the
Right.
medium-sized one. And
I clearly have offended you. I apologize profusely.
Just kidding. Just giving you a hard time. No, I went into the first days of motherhood not knowing what her life was going to look like because of a brain injury. And
Right.
so the whole first year of Lyndon's life was, is she going to be affected? Is this going to completely change the life we thought our daughter would have? And
Right.
luckily, Lyndon is not deeply affected
Right.
by it, but she could have been. And I feel like when I got to Ansel, because I had already walked a year of, I have to submit to the Lord that he loves my child more than I do, and
Right.
that he knows their future, that I could get there pretty quickly with Ansel.
Yeah.
Because he had shown me faithfulness in those days. And
Right.
so it was we're going to have to not project grief into the future. We don't know what the future is going to be. We have to take every day as it comes, take care of her in this day, and pray for healing and believe that could happen, but also believe that God purposes suffering, and he's purposed her life from the very beginning in her genetic code.
Right.
So we need to do what we can to rest in his promises and love her well by taking care of her well.
Yeah. So galactosemia, as Brittany has said, is an incredibly rare genetic
Yes.
disease.
Mm-hmm.
And if your mind works this way, you're probably doing the math going, oh, well, if it's a very rare disease, there's probably not a lot of treatment options,
Right.
and there's not a ton of research money poured into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of suffers the fate of all the other extremely rare diseases. It
Yeah.
just lacked the funding.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so as you go into it and you move out of sort of the infancy of it,
Mm-hmm.
both in Anne's and in your, it's brand new, and
Yeah,
now
right.
it's moved on.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what you did was you began to walk into, okay, if there's not a lot of money, I'm going to help fundraise for it,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start a 5K.
Yep.
And you call it Glow,
Mm-hmm.
and just talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so not like 2 months after she was born.
Yeah.
It's my personality. Every personality is different when you're dealing with loss and you're
Right.
looking at how do I move forward in this. But my personality was I want to do something,
Right.
but I have no science background. And I'm not going to be able to read all these papers, and I'm not going to be able to cure her or
Right.
go and speak at medical conferences. But I took what I had, which was I enjoyed exercising, and I was part of a gym, and I was like, I have people there. What if I just start a 5K? Like, what if we make it a family event and we can invite people in so they can learn about galactosemia? Because the more people who understand it
Right.
means my kids are safer in more environments
Sure.
because it's very dietary driven. But also, as Anne's is getting older, her cognitive deficits, like I want people to understand what it is
Yeah.
so that they're not frustrated or,
Right.
they can love her well and show her grace. So I just started, I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done a fundraiser. I feel extremely uncomfortable asking people for money, but this is my kid.
Right.
And not just her, but I wanted to get to know other families who had
Sure.
this genetic condition, and I wanted them to know I loved them and wanted to be part of their community. And
Right.
so this was my way of doing that too, was
Yeah.
saying, I'm here, I'm in it for the long haul. Like, I'm going to show up
Right.
and would love to know you. So it started as that, and I started it in Knoxville, but because it's so rare, I wanted to invite families that had this condition from all over the United States to
Right.
join with me because they're not in my backyard.
Right.
There's only, to understand how rare it is, there's about 3,000 people in the United States who have it. So I said there's a virtual option, and I shipped people T-shirts and kind of gave them some lingo, made a social media page
Right.
for education so people could share those things, and it grew from there.
Yeah. So, you have the 5K. How shocking to you was it that I won that 5K every year?
It was like, wow, Greg.
Yeah. I quit running in it because I was like, oh,
you were just making people feel bad.
Yeah. People were not running as fast. So, because I was there. It was truly a marvel to behold.
It was. We have the pictures.
There are no pictures.
There are no pictures.
We forgot to take pictures, so there's no proof.
Well, it was so fast. Like
Right.
The camera couldn't even get you. They didn't know you were
we
coming.
won't need that camera for about 10 minutes. And it was like, he's done.
Whoa, there he is.
So, okay. So, you began moving in Galactosemia circles.
Yep.
There's national organizations. They're, of course, very small.
Very small.
She won't tell you guys this, but I'll tell you this. She becomes one of their rock star people. And she gets moving in these things. And then, of course, always there is a trickle-down effect in medication.
Yeah.
So while there's almost no money going into try to research galactosemia for the development of treatments, things that are genetic modifying, and they're all flowing downstream. So as they learn gene therapy, there's a lot of hope for one day they'll be able to replace these genes, or at least one of them, and then everything's going to be fine. But that's not now.
No, not for us.
So eventually you come to a place where you have, you begin a drug trial.
Yes.
Okay. So how did you find out about that drug that they were trying to get approved to treat galactosemia with through the FDA?
Yeah. Well, GLOW led me to the foundation, which led me to volunteer to be on the board. And when you're on the board, you hear of things pretty early compared to the rest of the community, although we do a pretty good job of letting people know as soon as we can.
Right.
So I was
she was on the board. See. Okay.
That does not mean I'm a rock star, but okay. So at the first conference we went to, there's a conference every 2 years, and there was a woman there, Dr. Shoshana Schindelman, with a new biotech company startup. So if you don't know anything about the biotech world, if you know anything about them, you've heard of like Pfizer, which is the big, huge biopharma. But there are really small biopharma companies as well that you've never heard of. And that she had just started one. And she had this medicine that she thought was going to be used for diabetes, but realized that galactosemia down the metabolic pathway looks similar to diabetes. So the symptoms are different, the long-term effects are different, but the metabolic pathway is similar. And so she found about galactosemia, and she said, oh, I wonder if this medicine that we were developing would actually help this community. And so they started doing rat models and all these things. And Ann's is one at the time, and we're talking to her, and she said, would you guys be interested in being in a clinical trial? And one thing about galactosemia that's important to note is everybody with galactosemia presents differently. So I have 2 children with galactosemia, which haven't talked about Louie, but my youngest daughter has it also, and they present totally different, and they're sisters. And so it's very hard to understand why some people have long-term outcomes that are poor compared to others.
Right.
And so they're looking in this clinical trial mostly for the kids who have poor long-term outcomes to see if this medicine will help.
Right.
But my daughter's 1 at the time. So
let me ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
So there's different outcomes. Does any of that have to do with you didn't know Ann's had it until 7 days, but then I'm sure when Lou was born, they are immediately on it?
So there's differing research with that. Typically what the research shows is that we don't really know with Louise because we knew ahead of time. But if you had found out day 3 versus day 7 of their life, The immediate implications would be different. Like you wouldn't have a baby that was almost in liver failure like Ansel.
Right.
On day 3, you might have really bad jaundice and
Right.
a couple of things that were starting to look off. But long term, sometimes the day 3 kid does worse than the day 7 kid.
Okay.
Now, again, there's so few siblings to
Right.
know if Louise is so different because we knew
Mhm.
that it could happen, so we took precautions.
Yeah.
But across, and I don't think that research has been redone
Yeah.
in the last 20 years,
Yeah.
but when it was done in the 90s, that's what they found.
Right.
So we were talking about, Shoshana. So we
Mhm.
meet Shoshana. She's asking, at a year old, we already knew Ansel was struggling.
Right.
So a lot of kids with galactosemia, you do not see struggles that first year.
Right.
Ansel already was. And so we said, yes, we would be very interested
Mhm.
because our child
In
is
this
hurting.
drug trial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, if it had been Louise, I don't know that I would have been interested putting
Right.
my kid through what we put Ansel through.
Yes.
Um,
That kid.
Yeah. She's incredible and she's been through a lot. But if your kid's not already showing that they're going to have complications, there's not really a reason
Mhm.
to enroll. So at that point, we were like, yes, we're interested. Well, my relationship with Dr. Schindelman just increased as
Yeah.
they started having more research come out. The FDA has told them you can start this clinical trial about when Ansel was 3.
Yeah.
So it took a couple of years. It's a really long process with the FDA. You
Sure.
have to prove a lot of things in animal models before they're ever looking at
Sure.
human models,
Sure.
for obvious reasons. So at about age 3, this is right around the time COVID is starting to pop up. They're like, we want to start this drug trial. So they start it in adults first and then in children. And right around the time we're supposed to go to start the initial procedures
Right,
and things, there's a lot that goes with that. Somebody got COVID in the trial and it shut the whole thing down.
Right.
So it took a little while longer. She's almost 4. And then we started with a really small cohort of about 6 kids
Right.
where they were going to look at what is the dosing, because that happens before
Sure.
you start your bigger trial.
Sure.
So we were part of the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, we'll speed forward a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I'm probably giving too much
No,
information.
you're great. It's great. So you go through this trial and you begin to see improvement in Anne's.
Yes.
Like-
So it is a placebo trial. So we were not told if we were on placebo or
Right.
medicine, because then placebo effect can take place.
Right.
So, and all of the information is firewalled,
Yeah.
so that the company doesn't even know who's
Right.
on the drug. It's all through a rare disease clinic in Atlanta.
Right.
And once we got on the dose she has been on for almost 4 years, almost
Yeah.
4 years now. Wow. Yeah. Once we got to that point in the trial, it took a few weeks and we started to notice a difference. So we were able to say with most
You're pretty
certainly,
sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that we can't prove it, but we're fairly certain she's
Right.
on this medicine. And, you hear people say, well, parents see through rose-tinted glasses
Right.
and you're just hoping. But we had therapists and teachers and
No, I mean,
doctors, and they all were like, whoa,
it was like seeing a different kid.
yeah, this
I
is
can
really weird.
attest.
Yeah, it was like this. There's no way this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
This fast like this.
So the whole time, this study is being done as part of the FDA approval process.
Mhm.
Okay. So most of our listeners are going to know immediately, we have heard that is a laboriously long,
Yes.
detailed
Yes.
process.
Yes.
So the whole 4 years she's on it
Mhm.
so that all is still so they had to do the study phase. Once they get the
Yes.
study done, then they can present it to the FDA.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's different ways that looks.
Right.
Like in the rare disease world, because 1, you have a lot of unmet need, and
Yeah.
2, you have less patients. There's something called, and you see this in the cancer world too, accelerated approval,
Right.
where they will say, if you can prove with a biomarker
Yeah.
that there is change within the body and you can prove that it's had an effect on the life,
Hmm.
then while we're still watching the data come in, we're going to let the rest of the community have it,
Right.
because it's a it's a humanity thing. Like,
Right,
if we
right.
know this is helping these kids, we should let the other kids have it too.
Right.
So we had been, I say we, the Applied Therapeutics, the company, had been told, hey, this looks like it's going to be set for accelerated approval.
Right.
And we were told after 9 to 18 months on the medicine that the placebo kids would be able to get the medicine
Right.
and that we would have accelerated approval. And that got shut down pretty
Mhm.
quick. As new administrations come in and new people take
Right.
over, you get told one thing under one administration and then get completely hosed under another. So,
Right.
um,
Like this whole time you're thinking it's going to get approved. We're going to
Mhm.
be able to keep her on the medicine.
Yep.
And then they shut it down. And, is it immediately going, well, you can't have it anymore?
no, there is a program called Compassion Care.
Mhm.
So when the FDA, we found out the day before Thanksgiving
Right.
that
It was not a topic at all
no,
at our Thanksgiving
no,
this year.
no, I
And
was totally fine.
Britt did not come in and eat 47 rolls.
No.
And it's just like going,
what is wrong with you?
watch this.
We had been very much led to believe that this was a slam dunk approval.
Yeah.
We had done a lot of advocacy, and that's a whole nother thing. But it was a blindsided.
Yes. To
Very
say the
blindsided.
least.
So the day before Thanksgiving, this comes down, and it was called a CRL. So not a flat out denial,
Right.
but you have to change a lot of things to come back to the table for an approval. So
Right.
almost a denial, but
Right.
not a denial.
Not a no.
And-
Almost like your paperwork is wrong, kind of thing. Like technically wrong.
right, but
This is not exactly what happened, but just to explain it to our audience a little better, it's kind of like you misfiled your paperwork totally. You
Yeah.
have to start over.
right.
Almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we still don't know what the company was told. So
Yeah.
they could have to do a whole new clinical trial, or it could have been a really small data, something they had to redo.
Right.
But when you're in a rare disease community and you have very few patients,
Right.
that is pretty detrimental.
Right.
So we were told that because my daughter was in the clinical trial, she could stay on drug under compassion care
Okay.
while this.
But the other kids could.
But other kids cannot.
Yeah.
So and Applied Therapeutics has done a very good job of trying to bring as many kids in as they can.
Right.
But I can't imagine what it's like for parents who are watching our story unfold and watching Ansel have such success
Yeah.
from this medicine to be told, well, you may not ever get to give your child this.
Yeah.
It's just really tough.
Right.
And Louise is on it now too because of Ansel. But it's not the whole community.
Yeah.
And Applied Therapeutics has to supply it. So
Right.
they're not making the money that they need to make to
Right.
continue forward. So there's a lot of unknown right now with what is going to happen.
Right.
I'm really, really thankful my kids can be on it for
Right.
now. But it is I haven't really talked about exactly what the medicine does, but it doesn't completely heal my daughter.
Right, no.
No, she still has a lot of challenges.
Right.
But her cognition has significantly increased. So
Yes.
she had no memory. She had a really hard time with speech. She has sensory issues that she couldn't remember how to get herself better.
Right.
Like if she was uncomfortable, because she can remember the strategies.
Right.
But now she does have a good memory. She's reading,
Yeah.
which I never thought she would be doing. And she's able to know when she's starting to get overwhelmed and know what to do
Right.
to get herself back to
Sure.
a good place. So it's a huge margin
Right.
change for her life and for our life
Right.
that she can be on this medicine.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course, as being a mom of one of galactosemia kids and people that you know whose kids weren't on the trial, or at
Mhm.
least you can put yourself in there, you're just thinking, none of us could imagine it. Like when you called Jen, that's my wife, for those who don't know. And I mean, Jen just hung up the phone. She was just bawling.
Mhm.
And I was like, what happened? I didn't know. And then she kind of told me, and I was just like, I couldn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
So to go back to our starting point,
Mhm.
where, like, when this all goes down, what does your faith journey look like? I mean,
Yeah.
is this like another place where you're like, I mean, I was there at Thanksgiving, but
You can tell
like-
everybody what it was like.
well, it was, you can imagine what
there's
it
a
was
lot
like.
of grief.
There's
There's a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
and anger.
But, in your
Mhm.
faith journey, because you've had to do this before, where you had to just go, God cares more about these kids than I do.
Mhm.
how did you walk out that journey and still are? Because
Yeah.
honestly, it was 5 months ago.
Yeah, right.
Basically.
Yeah. And I don't know what their future is.
Right.
I don't know if they get to stay on this medicine. I don't know if a gene therapy will come about, I have seen so much fruit from Ansel's diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I, as I was thinking about this conversation, and I was thinking about Paul.
Not meaning her doing better.
No.
Spiritual
kingdom
right.
fruit. Like things that I never thought I would get to be a part of.
Right.
And I can share a little bit about that in a minute. But if the Lord came to me when she was born and said, she has galactosemia, this is a bad thing, but I'm going to make good out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to choose this and know that there's future glory here, or would you choose for her to not have this? I would have chosen for her to not have it.
Right.
I'm not going to act like I'm above that. I'm
right.
not. He, in his great mercy, didn't give me the choice.
Right.
And so I have gotten to see out of her life, and these momentary afflictions, I have seen a very small part of the glory that's coming because of it.
Right.
And the people I know, the conversations I've gotten to have, it would have never happened if she didn't have this.
Right.
And I don't know who she would be if she didn't have it.
Right.
Because God created her as a whole person, and this is part of who she is.
Right.
Do I want it cured? Absolutely. But if it's not, like, she has immense value living with this condition, as hard as it is. And so I do, it's a roller coaster. It is deep, deep grief, and then the greatest joys.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we talked about life being, but it is. And it's a beautiful picture of God showed us with Jesus weeping at Lazarus' tomb that it is okay and it's good to weep. Like this is the brokenness of sin that has taken this beautiful creation and these beautiful physical bodies that he created as very good, and there's brokenness. And so we're allowed to lament and grieve that.
We know it's so indicative of Christianity. If you look at God's ability to take what is wrong or evil or, a consequence of the fallen world, and which seems so unjust or evil or any of the metaphors we want to use for it, and make them good, because that's the fundamental biblical story almost, right? So the center point of Christianity being Jesus' cross being a perfect example. It is, literally us murdering our God and God using that betrayal to save us. So what we meant for evil, God meant for good.
Right.
Right. And it's, it's Joseph. It's the Joseph story. If I tell you the Joseph story quickly and I say, so one of Israel's sons is the favorite son, and his brothers get jealous and they kill him by selling him into slavery. The father thinks he's dead and he disappears for a while. And then they find him, he comes back to life and he saves them. You'd be like, wait a minute. That sounds like, But that whole story is when he sees his brothers again and they realize he's alive again. He said, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And it plays out all the way, but most appropriately in the cross itself.
Yes.
And so it's so fundamental to our redemption story that when we enter these places of suffering, like you're talking about, and this whole situation has been, we can't see the glory yet, but God has repeatedly shown us this pattern in our own lives, in the Scripture itself, and in His own body.
Yes.
That He can take now what seems almost impossible to be good and turn it into something you never imagined.
Right.
Right. It's just like the reality of saying, this bad happened, and I'm not sure I would change some of it. Not that you wouldn't, you obviously easily choose for none of this to have happened. The mom in you.
It's good that I can't choose because he's doing something with it.
Right. That you would, nobody would choose suffering.
Right.
Nobody would choose it. And so, trying to boil this down into a distilled form, sort of. After this all, like, you have faith in God. You know God is patient, kind, loving, gracious, all that kind of stuff. And if you were going to boil it down and say, now what is God? right, from this experience, you're going to boil it down and you're going to tell you're on an elevator and you're talking to a fellow
1
believer,
minute.
right? And you have like 5 sentences to say. Not you can say 30 sentences, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
What are you going to say then
Boiling it down.
about the totality of the journey?
God is faithful.
Yeah.
And just like the disciples and Mary at the foot of the cross as Jesus dies, they could not have ever imagined that that was going to turn out as a victory, ever.
Right.
That was devastating to them, and the suffering was beyond what they could imagine.
Yeah.
And, he rose victorious.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a 3-day Galactosemia story, and it might not be this side of heaven that I get to see all of the victory.
Right.
And it has been through God's grace. And I think it's because he knew that I needed to see some of the fruit here on earth. Sometimes we don't get that.
Right. Sometimes we don't.
And so don't hear me say that that's everybody's story. But I have gotten to see his faithfulness, and it just increases my faith that he is going to do what he promised.
Right.
So in the little things, if he's being faithful, then in the big, salvific, eternal things, he's faithful.
Okay.
And if Galactosemia is part of her story so that she can know Jesus, then thank you, Jesus, for Galactosemia.
Amen.
I mean, it's hard to say that, but that is the reality. And I don't think that I could say that 12 years ago when I first became a mom. I didn't have the fruit that he has shown me of his faithfulness to be able to make a statement like that.
Right.
And that's just the sanctification in my own life through the suffering. But I am excited to see what else he does in her life and in the life of all of my kids. Because just because 2 of them don't have a disorder doesn't mean the same is not true for their life.
No, they are.
And I will say too, that just because we live this story doesn't mean that there's not way more suffering in our future. Like just because, I felt like when my first daughter was born that, well, I get this check mark. Okay, well, we've done our suffering. So now motherhood should be a breeze. And God was like, I'm so sorry you believe that, because that is not true. Like more is coming. But I am going to be in it with you, and I am going to accomplish what I promised that I would. And if you can believe that is the most important thing, you're going to be okay.
Right. Right. So. I mean, yes and amen. It's the God's constant pursuit of the praise of his glory requires demonstrations of his glory in everything.
Yeah.
If it's all just victory, then you can't see God's glory when it's hard.
Right.
And, that is his pursuit, and why our suffering we know will become glorious because he's going to show his glory through it.
Yep.
So anyway, hey, thanks for joining us on Offstage. Special shout out to the Godzilla 4, 4 girls, the 4 horsewomen, as we call them, Godzilla's angels. We love you guys. Hey, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week. Y'all take care.
Yep, be good.